Anyway, before this, I'm showering and I get out of the shower. I'm like changing. He walks by, goes, "Hey, have you found Alpha Company's two-man tents yet?" It's like, "Sir, what? I'm not tracking Alpha Company's missing any two-man tents. And I'm also not the RO for Alpha Company's account. There's this person called the Alpha Company commander, and they just so happen to be the responsible officer for the two-man tents that are on their account, right? Because Supply didn't have any two-man tents. Every company had their two-man tents. H&S company had two-man. So like the two-man tent I slept in, the H&S company commander owned, and the supply officer for that matter didn't own any two-man tents. And no company commander had called me and said, "Hey brother, I got this problem. I did my CMR inventory. I'm missing like 10 tents. Is there any way you might know someone?" Because if that had happened, yeah, I'm ready to help a brother out. But no one had said anything to me, and here I am. I have the XO ask me where Alpha Company's two-man tents are. That just illustrates the misconception so many times of that the four just like solves everyone's problems, or that all of the anything related to logistics or supply is the four's problem. You know, that it's not my problem that you're missing your two-man tents. It is your problem because you're the one that signed for them and you're the one who's the RO. So
welcome to the Humorless Lot podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only. We do not represent the U.S. Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the U.S. government, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. As the hosts of this podcast, we also understand the risk we are undertaking by expressing our opinions, but we do so for the betterment of our 0402 community. If you have any concerns about anything you hear, please contact the producer listed in the podcast description. We hope you enjoy the show and that you'll look into our other community tools on Facebook, Discord, and Teams. Thanks for being here. Semper Fidelis.
Welcome back to the Humorless Lot. This is episode 4, part 3 of our Infantry Battalion S-4 series. If you haven't had the opportunity to listen to the first 2 parts, I highly recommend you go back and listen to those as it sets the stage for the conversation we're having now. We join the conversation in progress.
You're talking about as we work through our outline here, the next topic that we're going to talk through is the logistics support request, or the TSR, which apparently has multiple interpretations. There's many.
Correct.
Yeah, and I'm not going to even name them because I'll get made fun of because I screwed up an acronym. But feel free to school everybody on what all of those are. Yeah, we'll have to look up the DoD official joint pub on acronyms and see what that says. And then it's different because it's the Marine Corps. So yeah, so let's start there. Hate the LSR. We anticipate, plan, and discuss logistics.
That was me.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
all right, good.
I hate the LSR. Like it to me,
good.
Why even from my first on the COB side, it always caused miscommunication. When I got to 2-3, we had there was a process in place. There's a format that you get all the requests in and everything. But it to me, it just, you're trying to replace a conversation with a piece of paper, and half of the time it's just to cover your ass, to go, nope, you didn't submit that on time, which might work in the MLG world, but it just doesn't work in infantry battalion. It doesn't matter if they turned it in or not. You're still going to have to do it. Like the battalion commander is going to go, hey, I'm really sorry they didn't get the request in on time, but we have the ammo, we have the range, we have limited time. Is there anything you could do to help these guys out? We'll fix it next time, right? So to me, what I made my guys do before we had the 0481s was the TSR had to be filled out by somebody in the S-4 office, and it had to be a conversation between whoever was submitting the TSR, LSR, and the 4 shop. And that way there was a back and forth discussion. We filled it out just because we had to have something and turned it in. And things worked a hell of a lot better doing it that way. And it's an extremely unpopular thing to do. But I'll tell you, I think a little bit of pain in the front end made us a hell of a lot more effective on the back end. As far as either way, you're going to have to do it. But since we had the discussion with them, we knew what it was. There was no, I'm not trying to use the TSR to tell a company commander or a company XO that he messed up. It made it a little bit smoother. And I'll say another thing: if you don't know what an infantry company needs when they're going into the field, then you shouldn't be a logistician. The only thing I need to know from a company gunny is what time and where. You know what I mean? So like, a certain part of me goes to my guys like, you're the logisticians, not the company gunny. The company gunny is the senior tactical advisor to that company commander who has only 3 years of infantry experience, maybe, when he gets there. And now he's in charge of fighting an entire company. His first sergeant, you know his background. So the only person who's going to help him and help his Marines win the fight is that company gunny. I don't want to bother him with MREs and all that, but he does need to tell me like where the guy's going to be and when they need to be there. So that's my rant, but you guys can go ahead and beat it up.
Yeah, so I have a response. I think it's interesting you put LSR, and I was like, I don't remember what an LSR was. TSR, training support request. Now, if you talk about transportation support request, that's a TCPT thing, right? But which is where the acronyms get messed up. But back in the time when I showed up, it was called a TSR, and I never questioned why it was called a training support request. Never connected the dots. But it included the S6. It included everyone in the battalion, the BAS, everyone that provided support to whoever was training. So it wasn't just the S4 on this thing, and the S3 managed it. Generally, the S3 Alpha managed it, and I went through a whole like workup and training cycle and deployment. And when we came back, my S4 Alpha with the new S3 Alpha, who had been an 81st platoon commander, they got together and they fixed it, and they fixed the way the process was done, who owned it. And they made it more like you're saying. We didn't have someone from the S4 fill it out, but the XO or the company gun would come up to the 4 and fill it out with us, so we could understand, what they're thinking when they put, I want a Humvee, but they don't put a trailer, and they like everyone messes this thing up because they just don't know your capabilities very well either. When you're the 4, like a lot of the companies just don't know what you're capable of, and they don't know that supplied as porta-johns, not the S4, or and again, that's different at a different battalion. We would take the porta-john request and route it in GCSS to supply because they weren't part of the 4. It all gets very complicated, which is why it is important to do the face-to-face communication is probably the key part of it to me. But I think there's value for the 3 owning it. And like you said, the battalion commander, at the end of the day, if you have the range, you have the ammo, you're going to do the training. It's just, you're going to get told to figure it out anyway. But I think keeping a record of knowing who keeps being the serial offender, like our OPSO, the second OPSO, he knew from the 3 Alpha would tell him like, hey, freaking Charlie company keeps always being late. They can't get their stuff in time. They can't ever plan in time. Or if it was the 4's fault, if it's we mess it up, it's like, hey sir, sorry, like we missed that one. We're gonna have to jump through hoops to make it happen, but that one's on us. It did become somewhat of a cover your ass at a certain point, so I can see your point on that. But I think there's probably value to the 3 owning it. And yeah, infantry battalion versus CLB. I don't know the CLB experience, but of doing TSRs or LSRs, but in the infantry battalion side, after we kind of revamped the process and got everybody on the same page, I think it helped run the training meeting effectively. So when you show up to the training meeting, they reviewed TSRs. So there was also another touch point. It was the XO or the company gunny talking to each different section, filling out this thing, routing it through. And then every training meeting, which was once a week, they would come in and talk through all of them and make sure everybody was on the same page. So it created another touch point. But you almost have to have something that tells you, time and place, because right, if you don't know, generally speaking, what a company needs to do things, then you're not paying attention. But and at the same time, there's every now and then there's one thing that's pops up that you didn't expect. That, you know, if they didn't come up and talk to you and they just like snuck on that form, maybe you didn't even read and see it, which is the other thing that happens too, is they're like, oh, well, I put that on there. You're like, oh man, I forgot to notice that you said you wanted like a ratch because you were moving a 20-foot container of non-lethal pads and McMat gear because of whatever reason. Like I wasn't expecting that because I never have to deal with that ever. But then they go, ha, gotcha. Like, but you know, it becomes like a personality and relationship things too. Cause if it's a toxic kind of relationship, they'll put that on there and then, you know, they won't say anything. They won't say anything in the email. They won't highlight it. They won't say, it's like at the bottom of the page, you have to scroll down and to the right to find it. And then like 3 weeks later in a, you know, training meeting, like, so what's the status for non-lethal gear? Oh, you didn't hear about it for? Oh, it's in our TSR. Like, here's the original version. You're like, yeah, you know, everyone's giving it themselves like the high five from that company because they're like, I got the 4 on this one. So I think you're right in it, Scott, in the way of thinking about it, as they have to do. It has to be a face-to-face thing, and you have to come together to talk about it. But I'd still think the 3 needs to own it, and it does. It becomes a COIA, but hopefully the unit can get past it, and everyone can kind of understand how it works. But that TSR is that's one of, I mean, it ran the battalion in a certain effect. You know, every confirmation brief was a brief of what was done in a TSR for the past, you know, 3 months or something, depending on how long you've been planning for. So it's my 2 cents, I guess.
No, I love the way you put it. It's like, it's a face-to-face. So I really, and I think the TSR for training concur, the 3 owns it, I guess. The LSR would come up more in a tactical situation. So it could be combat, or it could be ITX, or it could be MRX, where the companies they're already training, and now they're submitting they're in the field and they're submitting an LSR. And there are ways to do that. And again, it comes down to, did you guys have 0481s at the companies?
We did. So they were in the company TO, but they worked in the 4. No company held on to their 0481 because they didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah, it ended up being good for us because, one, I thought just as a, I don't know, like as a community, they're super strong. Like they're smart for young men and women. But we did the same thing. We brought them up and we trained them, but we did have a habitual relationship with the company. So it ended up being that the 0481 was really the company police sergeant, or the LNO to the 4 shop. So whenever we went out to the field, or the only time I had 81s was in a UDP, that would be our deployment experience, is that whenever that company went out, they went out with them. And it was that 0481 who was sending the log stats, sending the log requests. So I was talking to him, and he was the middleman between the operations and then what was going on. And it worked out like super well.
There's a lot to be said for that. And the new infantry battalion structure has a bunch of 0431s organic to the company that it's so many that I don't think the 4 will be able to take them all under the 4 without protest from the company, which means they'll be forced to farm them down. I probably, in retrospect, should have done more of that. We made ours the Embark NCO representative for each company when we got them trained up, because we realized there's no one in the company that's going to be able to do that. So, but I kept them in the 4 shop to do UMCC, Embark things, all the other stuff that, you know, you needed, you know, NCOs and junior Marines to do. So in retrospect, it could have made sense, but then you lose a Marine for them being in the field for 2 weeks to do other things. So it's a trade-off, but you do get better log stats, right? Like you get, instead of getting a company gunny that says, you know, I've got 200 gallons of, you know, water left, you know, a water bowl is a quarter full or whatever. And they don't understand how many gallons are in a water bowl. So you get a bad number. But whereas you can train your Marine who's going out with them to be like, hey, look, this is how much is in water bowl. This is how you check this. This is how you do that. So I can see that. That actually makes a lot of sense. I think Lagos could learn something from when don't just leave the grunts to themselves. Like send someone out who knows what's going on so they can help, give you good feedback.
And they ended up being, it was a great experience because they all got, it's also an opportunity to give them awards and stuff. The usually I called them CSSEs, combat service support elements. We would task organize like cooks, because I was a big hot chow. I talked before, you said you're a big hot chow person too, but it'd be like cooks, an armor, an optics tech, maybe motor team mech, depending on the types of vehicles we were giving them, and the 0481, and that would be like their log debt that we would send with them. Just because if they did have, like, the problem with it is you really lose the flexibility to surge support. So there's a big con to that. Because basically I farm out my entire foreshop, and it's like me and my alpha staring at each other, right? We don't have any capability if somebody needs something from us, right? It's all farmed out.
Because the ammo tech set up their freaking tents at the ASP anyway, right?
Yeah. On the flip end, you have responsiveness. So if a weapon goes down, instead of me sending a maintenance contact team, they would identify the repair part, send it back to me, and then I would go, okay, then I can send whatever armor had that skill and the repair part out to them. They would fix it there and then come back. So it's, I think you gain responsiveness, but you definitely lose the ability to flex. And you usually have to cut something short, depending on what weapons company's doing. Because I can only do 3 successfully. So if weapons company's moving around independently, then
and weapons company has 81 snipers. They have multiple elements. You kind of have to. Granted, snipers takes care of themselves, but for the most part, depending on where you are. But yeah,
is the construct of the new battalion still have a weapons company? It's still
new infantry battalion just has 3 line companies, no weapons company.
Yeah.
But there's more 0431s, and the 4 shop has like an 1171 in it now.
Good.
A water dog, some other stuff. But down at the company level, they have a staff sergeant, and then an E1 to E3 for each one of the platoons. So there's 5 0431s at each company. So there's 15 written in the TO right now. I don't think that's going to make it to the end of the experimentation, because they're going through experimentation right now. I don't think that it will be like that at the end, because the community can't support that. There's no way you can put 3 staff sergeants 0431s for each infantry battalion in the Marine Corps do not exist. And they will not exist in now or in 2030 or ever, unless we make a very drastic change. But
well, does that count for the drastic change of the 0441?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah. And that would be, we were talking about before this started that, having a logistics school podcast, they're working on that. I think they're running a pilot course for 0441s right now. But back to the other thing, that was one thing. Armors were big. That's probably one of the highest impact ones you could give out to a company, or even just a range. If they're doing a range, send them an armor so they don't break everything and then show up with it broken. And the field mess guys too, sending field mess Marines to do the hot chow and have them do their actual job is a big thing, so it's that can be very important, and it can pay you dividends. Like you're saying, you may lose some surge capacity, but at the same time, you get a lot more responsiveness and better feedback. So yeah, the new battalion structure has enablers at the lower level across the warfighting functions. There's more intel, more comm Marines, everything. So
it's interesting you're talking about that, because like my experience in a 4 shop is before you guys, right? Before we had 0481s, but the mission set that we were doing is similar to what Dan and I were talking about before we started recording. We were talking about an article in War on the Rocks on mosaic warfare, and talking about deading out like the future of the infantry battalion and how all the different elements and enablers and infantry marines, like everybody has to work together to accomplish specific capability missions, etc. It's really similar to how we found ourselves in 2013 on a deployment to Afghanistan. Uh, we're recording on a Saturday, so it's not War Story Wednesday, so I won't go into too much detail. But at the end of the day, we basically controlled FOBs from Lashkar Gah all the way up to Nowzad and Musakela and Kajaki Dam. Like we basically took companies, including Weapons Company, and turned them into just regular companies, and they held that terrain. To do that from a force shop perspective, the best way that we could set up a concept of logistics was to debt out to all of those different companies small logistics elements, exactly what you're describing, Scott, where they had a generator mechanic, they had cooks, they had everything that was within the force shop got pushed out to the companies. And then on top of that, the individual companies had to train MHE, material handling equipment operators. They had to train additional Marines on messman responsibilities and on electrical grid. I mean, MEPDIS, understanding how you're supposed to hook up power to your COC at the company level and all that. Like they had to be able to do that without us sending Marines out to their FOBs every time something went wrong. And I think that model that we built all of that around is similar to the direction we're going now, where companies in the infantry battalions need to figure out how to bring in those enablers to support whatever mission they're trying to accomplish. Trying to figure out how we support the infantry companies is going to be an ongoing conversation about how all those different enablers are supporting the mission and how they all work together. And I think that's very different from 50 years ago, where we were seen as a force shop as you are an enabler, you will attach to them to go and support this, and this, and then you come back and we surge, right? We send them to do specific things depending on which company is in the fight doing whatever. Now we are these disaggregated elements all over the place that just need consistent support all the time, right? Like, how is that changing the way that we fight? Anyway, it's interesting that, circling back to my time in an infantry battalion, we were talking about that stuff 10 years ago. It is now coming back full circle. And the logistics support request, I have to say something about the logistics support request. For us, it was very much a menu. It was, you don't know what you don't know. And often I had to keep updating the LSR depending on what capabilities came online. So when CLB7 said, I have this new whatever flat rack refueling capability and I can move fuel to do this, and this, the LSR had to adjust to that so that I could show the companies that I can sustain you with this, and this for however long. That's a bad example because I don't know why an infantry company would need that much fuel. Maybe nowadays they would, but back then, whatever the menu was, it had all the dodics on it. It had all the stuff that they would need. There was still a need to talk everything through. I agree with you that there needs to be a meeting and you need to sit down and go through the LSR, but it allowed them ahead of time to kind of war game it at their level and see, okay, here are the capabilities, here's the stuff that we could request. And then we go to the training meeting and discuss what our op is going to be, and we work around what all the details are. And then my company, Gunnies and the XOs, had access to our LSRs at all times. So, you have, a FOPS outlook and a COPS outlook. The 4 shop in our battalion definitely controlled the LSRs. The 3 shop wanted nothing to do with them. But we did lump BAS, we did lump COM eventually under our LSRs, and everything was just kind of run rough. The S4 shop ran roughshod on all the different combat service support that was happening in the battalion. And that worked out really well. Like you're describing, like I think every battalion will figure out their own groove, but having a menu that they could just go down and be like, here's all the stuff that we need to think about to logistically support our exercise, I think that was really helpful with the LSR. I agree with you, though. It could become an excuse to not talk to each other, which is never the solution. Hiding behind emails and task trackers, it doesn't work.
Yeah. The problem, though, and I know you because I know you don't mean this, but the way it heard, there's a huge problem with requesting stuff, right? Because
I have instead of just saying your requirements, right?
Yeah. And I know that's like, that means a lot of things to a lot of people. And we say that a lot. That's a common argument in the community is like, tell me your requirement, you know, like, don't give me the solution to the requirement, even though they may know the solution. But which is true. It's all true. But there is something to like, I can give you a menu of stuff in a infinite world. And it's no problem to do that until all the companies request all the stuff at the same time. Mm-hmm. Now I have a problem. And if we don't have a mechanism, the training meeting's one for sure. And it sounds like you guys had great connections with them. But for people that are new and just starting this, it's important to recognize that, like, if it's mm-hmm. We're not trying to outsmart the companies by going, I know better than you do how to support. You're like, dude, it's we got a water bowl or a water jug. You know what I mean? There's only two stuffs to get, you know. Yeah. So we're not trying to say we're smarter. We're just trying to say, just in case everybody requests the same thing at the same time, it's good to know like what the actual requirement is so that we don't have to say no to somebody. We can say yes to everybody by trying to deconflict stuff.
And it's a great perspective, and it's awesome to hear our different perspectives on this, right? Because, you know, in one regiment, Dan was in another regiment, I was in another regiment, and like looking at it from different perspectives and different geographic spaces. I agree with you. I guess like the only thing that I would say is that at that point, if you do have conflicts of prioritization, and now I'm thinking, okay, that's the battalion, the company level. Like now we look at it a bigger picture in the theater level. It's an issue there too. Yes, everybody's going to ask for the same stuff, and it falls on somebody to start making decisions on prioritization as to who is going to get the stuff and who regiment gave me 4 7-tons to move people around with. Who's the priority company on Thursday to get those 7 tons to actually move into the range, and who's walking, or who's going to get the backup? You know, you're going to be the second in the round robin for that day. You're not going to get out to the range at 5. You're going to get there at 9 because like I need to do whatever. And that's where the conversation that we talked about in earlier episodes with the 3 shop needs to be happening. And there has to be a prioritization of who is in the chute, etc. I agree.
And we would give the 3 shop the answer whenever we could, if you had the right relationship. You know, the company would put, we need to move 180 packs to LZ Bluebird by 09 on this day. And I would go, you know, well, not me, but the 4 Alpha would go to the XO first and say, hey, I've got, you know, 3 7-tons and it's an hour round trip. So your guys have to be getting on a truck at 04 for the first platoon to leave so we can get everybody there by 9 o'clock. And sometimes the XO is going to say, that's good. I talked to CO, like, we know we got to get up early and you only have so many trucks, like no harm, no foul. So they just put a requirement of 180, and then you had to have the discussion. That's the important part about the discussion. Yeah. But I think one thing that sometimes people miss when they always say, just give me the requirements, is sometimes you need a certain thing for a certain reason. Like the company gunny, or, you know, I want a Humvee and a trailer because I want to be able to drop the trailer to do this so I can take my Humvee to go here to do that. Instead of giving me, you know, can you imagine if all of your TSRs were, well, I need, you know, 60 cubic feet of space for dry cargo. I need, you know, 500 gallons on whatever. It's like, then I would, you know, then I'd go through and say, all right, well, 50 cubic feet. Okay, that fits on a 7-ton. You're getting a 7-ton. And the company gunny is going to go like, I don't have a license for that. I can't, there's no trailer. I can't drop the stuff I don't need and just leave it. You know, he's going to be pissed,
where that,
right?
That relationship between the company gunnies and the 4 shop. And you're right, Scott, like I was blessed to have really good company gunnies and a really good relationship with them where they felt comfortable walking in my office and be like, sir, this is bullshit. I don't want this. Like, and we're going to have an episode. I'll plug this. So we have an episode with one of my company gunnies that's already got the outline written. Like it's going to be good. He just recently retired, so he can say whatever he wants. He retired as a sergeant major too, so like he wasn't an idiot. He's a really good dude. So yeah, the company gunny perspective in that relationship, I guess another plug for our 0402s out there. Like if you're not friends with your company gunnies in terms of like, hey,
company gunny didn't come into my office unless it was serious. If a company,
you were the 4 though. See, I was the 4 Alpha. See,
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Talking to
I
the
knew
LTs out
if a
there.
company gunny was talking to me, I was like, what did my chief mess up this time?
Yeah, I could see. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I was just a dumbass for Alpha. So
You
Do we
had
need to-
everybody when in your office.
yes.
Do we need to get another company gunny on that? See if they want to hash it up.
Yeah, dude, bring
I got a
bring
retired
it. You got
master gun,
extras.
recently retired master guns who I'm sure would love to come
Ooh,
on.
good. Retired Master Guns and a retired
Guns,
Sergeant Major.
Farm.
That's
Yeah.
exactly.
They're gonna
That's
have all these
exactly what we
hardship
need.
stories about the
Oh,
Corps
company.
said they were gonna give me this and I didn't get anything.
Maybe. I hope.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a great conversation. So yeah, definitely. Yeah. So the final section we've got here, we got 4 bullets.
I think Scott's got the 110 laptops. So I wonder what that story's about.
Oh my gosh, man. Okay. This goes under an umbrella that we could talk on for days. And I'm sure it's how under-resourced infantry battalions are in general. It flabbergasted. We went through it a little bit when we talk about managing lieutenants, where it's like, dude, you're the amount that you put on an infantry captain or a logistics captain infantry battalion, I think, is it's not fair to the lieutenants. Just having been a company commander as a captain and then been an S-4 as a captain, it's not fair to the lieutenants. But I guess life's not fair, so we'll move on.
That perspective I haven't heard until you talked about it in the beginning one, because I haven't done both. I haven't done company command and S4, but it does make sense. You know, all you have to worry about is developing, like training and developing your unit. Whereas when you're an S4, you have a whole lot of other things to worry about, plus developing lieutenants.
Yeah.
So that was a good point you made, I think, in the first episode.
And that's good for like captains who haven't done that, but have been battalion S4s. And especially if you seem like a really good dude, like you take your job to heart. It's kind of like you feel kind of like a failure every you go home going, God, I wish I could be like, all right, man, you know, like I wish I could be better. And I just want to let you know, I've done the Campbell Commander thing, and that's all you do. So those captains aren't any other better than the guys who are trying as best as they can to give mentorship to these lieutenants, but they have a ton of other priorities. So
not everybody thinks like that, Scott. I appreciate that you do. It's definitely something that keeps me up at night, even now, thinking back and being like, I wish I'd done that differently, right? Like,
yeah.
I hope most of our Marine officers out there do think like that and take to heart the development. Because man, it's like, especially how small our Marine Corps is, like the interactions that you have and the people that you run into. I mean, look at you and me, Scott. Like dude, our orbits have like crossed so many different paths. You got out of the Marine Corps and joined the reserves, and we're still crossing paths. You know,
yeah.
tried escaping, but we're still here. You know.
Yeah. But the laptops thing. So I brought this up to the. I actually brought this up to the Secretary of the Navy, and he kind of waved me off. This is like 5 years ago, so I don't really care. When I was at 2-3, and I don't know if this is I don't know who controls the amount of laptops, so I don't know what level this happens at. But we had just transitioned to GCSS Marine Corps, and in GCSS Marine Corps, if you're doing FASMO standard maintenance administration, like you're supposed to be at a computer. Like if you're in the maintenance crew, you should have a tough book on the floor. Like I changed the filter, you know, like I changed the tire, right? So you should have
nobody has that.
Yeah. So, but that's the standard that the Marine Corps has set, right? So the Marine Corps has set a standard that we have to meet according to FASMO. Same thing for supply. Same thing for warehousing and supply. Like there is a standard. So most of your
51s.
51s, you might have one computer for inventory management because all your computers are going to the computer nerds, right? Your DASF clerks. Everybody has to do TCPT, CLC2S, like name
TAMIS.
Name the acronym of the day. Like I had a computer, my 4 chief shared with my embark chief, my ammo tech shared with the TCPT. it was absolutely disgusting. And it was no better at the infantry companies, where all of your training now is online. So they have like 4 or 5 computers per infantry company. But yet we're moving towards McTims, where now all of your training has to be uploaded to McTim. So we had like 133 computers per battalion in 2000 and say 14 or 15ish. They came through like all of these new requirements come in. We're going in the phase mill. I'm like, okay, shoot, now we actually got to pay attention to this maintenance stuff. And then they take away like 23 computers, but they add more requirements for me to do on computers. And it just maddened me like completely. But that is like a quantitative example of how the Marine Corps under resources infantry battalions. And then I go to a joint command, and there's at least 37 desks with like 3 different computers, because you have Nipper, Sipper, and TS. But there's like 37 seats empty with 3 computers each. I'm like, can we give like 30 to 2-3? Because like that wouldn't even take all of your TS computers away. Like just and that's, to me, it's just indicative of the problem. When I brought it up to the Secretary of the Navy during some town hall that we had, he kind of waved me off like, computers, I don't know anything about computers. It kind of like laughed me off the stage. And so I'm a little bitter about it, because it's a real problem. It's a real problem. And I think that's just a quantitative example of MOSs, of ranks, of everything that happens within the infantry battalion, how the infantry battalion gets slimmed down and is not given the resources to meet the standard that the Marine Corps sets. And then I'm gonna hand the floor over. Sorry.
That's good. Resourcing. So specifically, we're talking making sure that the training and readiness standards that an infantry battalion is expected to be able to perform are resourced with the equipment, man trained and equipped, with the stuff that they need to do those TNR standards, basically, right? Does that make sense? Or is it?
Yeah.
That wasn't as passionate as yours, so.
I mean, the thing is, we all know it, and the Commandant knows it. And this is not a secret, which is what is infuriating to me, is that like everybody knows that this is a problem and nobody tries to solve it. All they do is cut and cut and cut from the base unit of the Marine Corps. And then they wonder why their information is wrong at the top. Well, we all have heard the statement, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't give me the resources at the bottom, then all your information at the top is going to be garbage. So why don't you give me the correct resources at the bottom and then hold me accountable so that you can have accurate information at the top? That's my argument back to whoever resources infantry battalions, in this case, computers, but we can talk MOSs and ranks later. That's my argument.
Yeah.
It doesn't even go that high. Like division will be going, why isn't your McTims reported correctly? It's like, because I have one McTims clerk within the entire battalion that's trying to do all that. Why isn't your DERS right? It's like, because I have one Sipper machine that my MMO, my S3, my CO, my everybody uses. Like, why isn't this right? Why isn't that right? Well, yeah, maybe because, we haven't been given the proper tools to accomplish half of these things you're telling us to do.
Yes. And they know it. Because if you go to the division office, there's like half empty desks, all with Sipper and Nipper machines.
Yeah, it is interesting trying to understand how the tactical level pushes the strategic level, right? Like we had a short little conversation on this in our Discord server, talking about log op, right? So logistics, common operating picture, combat operating picture, depending on, I guess, who you talk to, but having a common understanding of how all logistics is being tracked across the theater, And a lot of the conversation about log cop is focused on the Marine Corps and specific theaters and specific places. But from the world that I'm coming from in the joint environment, there's a ton of conversation about the joint logistics enterprise and trying to understand all the different requirements across multiple theaters, and now trying to figure out how you resource logistics inter-theater. And that's a reality of like, how do you surge stuff from CONUS to different parts of the world, etc. It starts with the garbage at the tactical level.
Yeah.
And understanding what is happening there. Information that comes from the tactical level is going to drive decision making that's happening at the strategic level. And somebody said, like, well, what about mission command? And like, without going into too much detail about discussing that, like, is that it would be a great conversation. Like, is that even possible in what we're talking about when we talk about, okay, in order for decisions to be made at the top, the information needs to be fed in from the bottom so that the leaders at the top have accurate information to make the decision in order to push it. It's like the self-fulfilling prophecy of whatever. And if they're not resourced with the computers to actually feed the data in at the bottom, then you can't really trust that data once it bubbles up to the J3 in the belly of the Pentagon, who's pulling these stats and this information and trying to make decisions off of it, right? So many implications of everything that you're talking about.
The mission command comment, and it's hard to type out on Discord, but you're a logo, you're a staff officer, you're not a decision maker, and you have no mission command. You need to provide the best information to the commander to make the decision. So you don't mission command logistics. Sorry, TSC commander, sorry, you don't mission command logistics. Like, you need to have the best information flow from the bottom. When it comes to the log cop, as far as I'm concerned, it needs to be automated. There needs to be more sensors and stuff in the field that's providing that information that's transparent across the supply chain. And that's not popular. It's we all want to add our 10% because higher headquarters doesn't understand how to anticipate our future requirements that they don't know about because we're still working them out. So like, it's, there's all kinds of problems with transparency, but I think anytime you get humans involved in anything, there's inefficiencies. And, I look at fuel and water specifically, and it can be easily, the commercial world does it. Like, fuel is expensive in the commercial world. For the military, we don't care. Like, literally, I've heard, I'm not going to name names, from the highest level, people go, I don't care about fuel cost. It doesn't matter to me. The people who care about fuel cost and care about supply chain efficiencies in the commercial world, and you can monitor fuel and water levels from anywhere in the world by a very inexpensive sensor and a very inexpensive ping to the sky. So, and there's a lot of things that we can automate like that. Company gunny sending log stats to the next guy who's adding 10% to the next person, who's adding 10% to the next person. By the time he gets to the joint level, it's garbage. But
yeah, confirmed. Garbage in equals garbage out. Yeah, I'm interested to see how we continue to develop that. That is, there are definitely people who care about that and are spending a lot of time trying to figure that stuff out, and they're all sitting in their own stovepipes of excellence in many different places all around the deal.
Oh yes, I'm very aware of all those many of those stovepipes. I won't get on that soapbox. Yeah, I think this is a good segue. I'll tell my two-man tent story because I'm the one who put that up. So this one goes to like the supply XO company commander S-4 relationship, because I'll set the stage. I think we're back from deployment. Maybe we're starting the next workup now. We still have the same XO and command staff and everything. And I come in before the XO stand up every day. That's at 8 o'clock because our XO just wanted to waste our time every day. And that's in a whole another soapbox I could get on. But it was me me, the supply officer, and the MMO, as if one or not both of them didn't work for me. It's like, why do they both need to be here? Anyway, before this, I'm showering and I get out of the shower. I'm like changing. He walks by, goes, "Hey, have you found Alpha Company's two-man tents yet?" It's like, "Sir, what? I'm not tracking Alpha Company's missing any two-man tents. And I'm also not the RO for Alpha Company's account. There's this person called the Alpha Company commander, and they just so happen to be the responsible officer for the two-man tents that are on their account, right? Because Supply didn't have any two-man tents. Every company had their two-man tents. H&S Company had two-man. So like the two-man tent I slept in, the H&S Company commander owned, and the supply officer, for that matter, didn't own any two-man tents. And no company commander had called me and said, "Hey, brother, I got this problem. I did my CMR inventory. I'm missing like 10 tents. Is there any way you might know someone?" Because if that had happened, yeah, I'm ready to help a brother out. But no one had said anything to me. And here I am. I have the XO asking me where Alpha Company's two-man tents are. That just illustrates the misconception so many times of that the 4 just like solves everyone's problems, or that all of anything related to logistics or supply is the 4's problem. That it's not my problem that you're missing your two-man tents. It is your problem because you're the one that signed for them and you're the one who's RO. So that to me was just when that happened at the time.
That's it right there, Kim. That's the intro soundbite.
At the end, like that was towards when I'd been a 4 for probably over a year. So I'd started to kind of figure some things out and I wasn't brand new anymore. And that was one of those defining moments for me when I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do anything about this. The next day, the XO stand up. "Hey, found those Alpha Company two-man tents yet?" "No, sir." Like, what am I going to do?
Nope.
I think I eventually
looked at my sock drawer this morning. Couldn't find them.
Nope, still not my problem. Keep going.
In the background, I was telling the supply officer, like, "Hey, man, call your supply buddies in the other battalions. Get in contact with a few people. See if somebody needs some that they have excess, so they can write them off or whatever else." So I was working in the background, but I was like, I'm sticking to this point because I'm not responsible for any of these guys' freaking stuff. And I mean, it all came full circle with, we had a company that checked out cold weather gear and sub-signed it from the SUPO, and they didn't turn it all back in. They tried to blame the losses on the supply officer. I mean, it was to the point of, I was like, "You're going to have to fire me. If you're going to fire the supply officer, you're going to have to fire me first," because my supply officer did not lose all that stuff. Fortunately, the command deck eventually saw the light and realized kind of where things went wrong in procedures. But that to me was like, yeah, if you can define, being a 4 sometimes, it's like just solve everybody's problems and everyone looks at you like the guy. So, which is sometimes good, but sometimes not so good. If you wanted me to help you, you could have called me first and be like, "Hey, man, I'm gonna have to tell the XO I'm missing tents tomorrow unless I can find some. Can you help me out?"
Yeah.
But
That's the kind of
difference.
relationship. That's the kind of relationship cultivation stuff that we all need to get good at. Is
Go
talking to each
down.
other.
My office was second deck. All the company offices were down. That's where they do the East Coast battalions in different wings of the building. The second time around, I made more effort. I was more of a peer with the rest of the company commanders to go down to their office and talk to them every week. I mean, maybe not every day, but go down and check a pulse and talk to them. Whereas like the first time around, I just didn't have a lot in common. We didn't hang out outside of work. We didn't really know each other that well. They were all very senior to me. And I feel like there was a lot of a lack of trust just because I was so new. But I was probably the boot captain of the battalion, which didn't help anything. So that plays a part too. But yeah,
there's like a stance of going down, and the thing is, like, when you first show up, this is probably like some good advice for somebody. And Dan, you seem like a great dude, man. I'd love to work for you. When you call a company commander, like something gets messed up, and your company gunny is talking to you 4 Alpha, and they're going, and you call a company commander, you're like, "Hey, man, I messed this up. I'm going to tell the XO right now, like, timeline's jacked up. We're going to fix it next time. Here's what happened. and we're on it. Like, this is jacked up. I just want to let you know we're gonna fix it, and here's some things we're gonna go. I'm gonna go tell Exo right now. When you do that, it sets a whole, because you're gonna what's just had this conversation like this weekend. Like, I'm probably like we had to fill it up this weekend in the reserves, and like I'm a major in a reserve infantry battalion. I should probably be a lot better than I am, but we still fail, right? Because there's things that go on. And I'm like, dude, I'm probably failing right now. I don't know. But what
There's
I
this
know,
thing called Murphy, and they have a vote too.
what I know is I'm awake. I got my phone on me, and I'm ready to friggin' like, like make right whatever Murphy made wrong, you know. And it's when you make those phone calls and you go, hey man, look, you don't have to like bow down, but like, hey, look, I'm working this. I'm telling XO right now. Go to tell XO, hey, we jacked this up. Emergency woke up late. This is what we're trying to do to fix it. You know, I think that goes a long way. And just, I think people with a natural personality do it anyway. It sounds like you guys just have that. People who don't have that natural personality, don't be afraid to go do it. Like, don't think that it makes you look bad. You know what I mean? Like, you already look like,
I mean, I could tell this is your mindset, and maybe I'm just going to say something just you're kind of thinking. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the Marines. So if you're telling the company commander ahead of time, like, look, the trucks aren't going to show up on time and XYZ, they have a chance to tell the company gunner to pass it down so the Marines know to not be sitting on their pack for 2 hours because the trucks didn't show up on time. Instead, you wait and say, well, maybe we're going to figure it out, or no one's going to find out we screwed this up, and no trucks have showed up for 3 hours, and everyone's pissed at you because it just had 3 hours of their time wasted. But if you tell them ahead of time and tell them you're working on it, then it lets them like manage the damage with their Marines and save some morale maybe. But because at the end of the day, that's what company commanders care about. And I mean, as long as if you also care about that too, then you're moving in the right direction. But that's definitely who, once you start messing with company commanders, Marines, and then you start crossing lines that you can't get back. You can't walk that back very easily. But I think that's what you're 100% saying, and knowing when you screwed up and you have to say something about it is tough, but it's gonna happen. So
humility can go a long way. And I think that one of our leadership principles, right? Seek responsibility, take responsibility for your actions. And I think a lot of people kind of forget like the second part, like, yeah, you have the authority to do all these things, but then you also have the responsibility to make sure it's happening. And I 100% agree with you, Scott. Like, the times where I've been able to humble myself and go preemptively strike and say like, hey, this is screwed up, but this is how we're solving it, always 100% better than having the XO come to your office and be like, I heard this was screwed up. What are you doing to fix this? Then you have to try and fight your way out of it. You can preemptively let everybody know that you're not wearing any pants, and it helps, I feel like.
Yeah, Dan's 100% right. At the end of the day, you think about, imagine yourself in that dude. Just have a little empathy. Imagine yourself in that friggin' PFC. You're like, dude, the Marine Corps is so stupid. Like, they can't get the trucks there on time. You know, and you're like, dude, it's not the Marine Corps. It's the friggin' Lance Corporal that didn't wake up. You know what I mean? Like, but everything's the Marine Corps to them. You know, like, they're so stupid. They're like, man, dude, like, and that's
it might not even be your fault. Like, the 2nd Marine Regiment motor pool freaking nerd who keeps the keys, left them in his truck and forgot where they were. So it took him 30 extra minutes to find the dang things to open the motor pool, which is why the 7 tons aren't going to show up on time, because like there's a myriad of things. That's one thing you learn when you start to get super paranoid.
That was the joke at Locke, right? That was the thing at Locke when we did our FEX at the end of logistics officers course, right? They were like, we're not actually going to schedule problems into your FEX. The problems are just going to happen.
I don't remember
you
that.
Just have to deal with it. Maybe it was just us. Was it Operation Blue Devil or something silly like that? Whatever our FEX was. They were just like, I think that's what it was. They were like, we're literally not going to put any problems into this. They're just going to happen. And they were right. It was all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Logistics.
Yeah.
And we're all lieutenants too. There's not even any Lance Corporals.
Seriously. Yeah, you get
Yeah.
enough of us together, we create our own
Oh, no.
problems.
On that, the kind of under the TSR line, one thing that I tell to kind of, if you got a shop that's like kind of salty, especially if you walk into a salty shop, like they got it all in, they got it going on. They need a little humility. But they already got it. You don't have to do this. One of my favorite things to like humble people is that, like, hey, but they're like, oh God, dude, the companies always want something. Like they're always requesting something. And
You're
I'm
right.
like, I'm like, dude, do you realize that like your billet exists because the companies have a request? That means that like that dip you have in your mouth that you're enjoying, that you get paid for, is because they have a request. If you're the house that your wife is staying in right now, is because the companies have a request. So every time you get a request, I want to hear thank you come out of your mouth. I want to hear thank you, Gunnery Sergeant. Every time every time the LSR call comes in, I want you to be like, good morning, and thank you so much for giving me a job. My wife enjoys her time on Hawaii. But I mean, obviously your Marines are, but it's when people get too caught up in themselves, and if the company's being wrong, you always acknowledge truth. But sometimes we get kind of caught up in our lives, and it's like, dude, think about it. If they didn't have a request, you wouldn't have a job. You wouldn't have a dip in your mouth. Like, why do infantry battalions get the junior Marines? Going back to the garbage in, garbage out. Why? To me, I feel like the entire community, the monitors, the manpower. Now it's not. Now that it's supposed to be talent management, not manpower. Hopefully, we work on this. But I feel like we get the boot staff sergeants to be a supply chief, along with like a boot lieutenant, and we get like the boot motor T chief. And yeah, we get a gunny sometimes, like maintenance chief, who's never been in infantry battalion before. He's only been at like maintenance battalion. We get the boot staff sergeant, if it's a staff sergeant, for our log chief. It's like, why we are the base unit that every other supporting element currently in the MAGTAF needs requirements from in order to develop their scheme of maneuver. Why do we under resource again with personnel and expect them to perform well above their rank? It just doesn't compute in my head that you would do this to a battalion. Like, it doesn't compute in my head. Like a COB supply chief, he's not running the type of money and responsibility that the supply chief of infantry battalion is. But they'll give that supply chief like a gunny, and it just boggles my mind. And then they'll give like a boot lieutenant to a supply officer who's managing the fiscal for an infantry battalion, and expect him and a boot chief to be able to do something that they've never done before with very little guidance. And maybe the little bit of guidance is an issue. I would say the most successful regimental staff that I've seen as an infantry battalion for, so this isn't like I've seen plenty of good, was 4th Marines was good. They're just super busy. They're like the way I put it, to if you're going to UDP to 4th Marines, and Kevin, you can keep this in. Here's what I would say about 4th Marines: do not bring them a problem. If you bring them the solution, from my experiences, 9 times out of 10 they'll make it happen. If you bring them a problem to solve, they're going to laugh at you and tell you to solve it. tell you what do you need from me. So the best regiment I had was I'll say Colonel Tim Winan. I love this man. He basically told his staff in front of the infantry battalions, your fit rep does not depend on what you do. Your fit rep depends on how they do. So that was a paradigm shift that I've probably used for the rest of my life. But it's a great way to, you know how much help I had? I had the most help I've ever had of like in my entire life, even in the civilian world. Like when like the four and Arle's he was a great dude anyway. I knew him as a battalion four. He's a great mentor of mine. Then he went to be the regimental four. He was a great dude anyway. But I think that just gave him the power with his master guns and master arms. They got all these like rockers and chief warrant officers at regiment that usually are like surfing or something. But when it comes down to like, hey, your fair up doesn't depend on how smart you are. I don't care about that. Your fair up depends on 2-3's phasmo. That's how I'm going to grade you. So you better be so inside of that guy's phasmo. I just renamed phasmo. But if you better be so much inside phasmo that he gets a green because your fit rep depends on it. And let me know if he's not paying attention to you. And that was my second tour. I think from a higher level perspective, like just a great way, because we don't have the help. And the regiment, if they become like taskmasters that don't help you, like Dan's experience, like I'm sure, where it's like, you just created problems for me. But instead, the regimental commander tells them like, hey man, I'm sorry that Scott sucks, but you better fix him or you ain't going to get promoted.
Any final thoughts as we close out? Like, thank you so much for your time. Like I've burned like 6 hours of your time. Final thoughts or stuff that comes to mind?
No, not from here. It was great to meet you, Dan. I hope to see you next time. I'll hit you up next time I'm in Quantico. I'll be at Modern Day Marine too. In June doing that. But I'll be there working in my civilian capacity. So link up.
Yeah, I think we'll have like a booth and a full blown thing there for that. But yeah, I mean, on S-4 thoughts, yeah, I mean, we talked about it earlier. In fact, Scott, you said it, like, be humble, and as a Lago, just like know you're going to solve a lot of problems, and you're going to be out of your comfort zone. So as long as you know that going into it, it's a good time.
That concludes our episode and our series on Infantry Battalion S-4s. Thanks for joining us as we all sat here and cathartically worked through our emotional damage from being in an S-4 shop. This is the first of hopefully many conversations between us as we try and work out what all of these different billets and experiences meant for our development, and hopefully as a way to help future logistics officers do better at their jobs. Our next conversation will be between us 0402s and a couple 0430s as we talk about relationships and expectations of mobility officers in the Marine Corps. It was a great conversation. I felt like I learned a ton listening to these guys spout some wisdom. Hopefully it's insightful for you as well. If you like what you've heard here, please share our community with other 0402s that you feel like will benefit from being part of the community. We look forward to hearing your feedback, and if you have more ideas for podcasts, please share it with us. We're available on Facebook, Discord, and our team site. We look forward to hearing from you. Yep, that's my newborn child in the background. All right, see ya.